Hollis Miller had seen 36 winters, each one carving deeper lines into his face than his age should have allowed. A widower, childless, and alone, he lived in a weather-beaten cabin at the edge of the woods. The walls were his only companions, the fireplace his only witness. Every night, he sat before the flames, staring at the empty chair across from him, the chair where his wife once sat. In town, they called him Giant Miller, a man of immense strength and few words. His hands were like hammers, his shoulders broad as the barn beams he built. Yet his silence carried more weight than his muscles. He avoided saloons and gossip, living quietly, apart from the noise of others. That night, the wind whispered through the trees, heavy with the scent of snow. Then came a sound, sharp, trembling, deliberate. A knock. Hollis paused mid-motion, a log in his hands. No one came this far after dark. He set the log aside, opened the door, and found a child. She couldn't have been more than 7. Her dress torn, her boots split at the toes, her hair tangled and crusted with snow. Her cheeks were raw with cold. But it wasn't the frost that filled her eyes with fear. It was something older, deeper. She looked up at him, trembling, and whispered, They beat my mama. She can't get up. The word struck through Hollis's silence like an axe through wood. Who's your mama, child? He asked. Mary Ellen Carter. She's by the creek. Please, sir, please help her. The name stirred something in him. A memory. Mary Ellen Carter. A quiet woman with gentle eyes, often seen shrinking behind her husband. Elias Carter. A drunk and a brute. Hollis had seen Elias strike her once in the store. He'd turned away like most men did, bound by the unspoken law of the frontier. A man's home was his own business. But hearing her name now, from her daughter's trembling lips, shamed him to the bone. He crouched so his towering frame wouldn't scare her. What's your name? Laura May, she whispered. Get inside, he said softly. She hesitated, then stepped in as a gust of snow nearly knocked her over. Hollis took his coat, pulled it tight, and walked out into the night. The moon guided him across the snow-blanketed prairie. Miller's Creek lay a mile off, through the skeletons of cottonwoods that rattled in the wind. The shack came into view, a ruin of logs and sagging roof, the chimney long cold. Inside, he found her. Mary Ellen lay on a bed of rags, her face swollen, one eye closed, her lips split and bleeding. Her wrists bore rope burns. Yet when she looked at him, there was no pleading in her gaze, only dignity, bruised but unbroken. You shouldn't have come, she rasped. They'll ruin you for this. Let them talk, Hollis said quietly. He gathered her in his arms, lifting her as though she were light as air. She gasped but didn't resist. He wrapped her in his coat and carried her through the storm. When he reached the cabin, Laura ran to the door. Mama, she cried. Hollis laid Mary Ellen on his bed, the only bed. She protested weakly, but he hushed her. He stoked the fire high, fetched water, and tended her wounds with rough gentleness. She never cried out, though pain etched across her face. Silence filled the cabin again, but it was different now, not empty, not lonely. It was a sound of 3 souls breathing in unison. Outside, the wind wailed across the plains. Inside, Laura drifted to sleep beside her mother, clutching her torn sleeve. Mary Ellen watched Hollis by the fire, the light catching the worn lines of his face. She wanted to thank him, but shame held her tongue. For the first time in years, she closed her eyes and felt safe. But in town, Elias Carter was drunk and loud. He raged that his wife had been stolen, that the giant had taken her. He vowed revenge, and men gathered to listen. Hollis's name spread on every whisper like wildfire through dry grass. At dawn, Hollis rose as he always did, but his cabin felt changed. There was a woman's touch again, a soft voice, the smell of broth, the sound of a child's laughter. He cooked clumsily, bringing food to Mary Ellen, who thanked him in a whisper. Laura began to smile more, especially when Hollis carved her a small wooden horse. She held it as if it were treasure. But the world outside the cabin grew crueler. In town, people muttered. Women whispered. Men smirked. He took her in, all right, they said. Took her right into his bed. Hollis said nothing. He bore the gossip like winter itself, something to endure, not fight. When Sunday came, he hitched the wagon. "We're going to church," he said. Mary Ellen hesitated. "They'll stare." "Let them," Hollis said simply. At the church, whispers filled the pews before they even sat down. Reverend Hodges' sermon faltered when his eyes found Mary Ellen. After the service, Mrs. Calloway, the town's sharpest tongue, cornered her. "My dear, perhaps it's best you find kin. Folks are talking." Mary Ellen wilted, her hands trembling, until Hollis stepped between them, his shadow falling over Mrs. Calloway. He said nothing. His silence alone sent her scurrying off. That night by the fire, Mary Ellen whispered, "I've brought ruin upon you." Hollis didn't look up from the wood he carved. "I'm not after forgiveness," he said. "I'm after peace." Something broke in her then, not from pain, but from the quiet grace in his words. She began to heal, her strength returning, her movement slow but sure. She mended his shirts, swept the floor, and hummed softly to herself. Hollis listened, wordless. The sound of her humming made the cabin feel alive. But peace never lasts long where pride lives. In the saloon, Elias Carter drank and cursed, promising to reclaim his woman. The sheriff warned him to leave alone, but Elias only laughed. Soon word reached Mary Ellen, and fear returned her eyes. "He'll come," she whispered. "He always comes." "Let him," Hollis said, his voice calm, immovable. That night, Laura climbed into his lap by the fire. "You won't let him hurt Mama again," she whispered. "Not while I draw breath," Hollis said. Mary Ellen watched, tears glinting in the firelight. For years, she believed all men carried cruelty in their hands. But here was one who carried kindness instead. Still, hope always draws its shadows. When Hollis came home from town one evening, he found a note nailed to the door. "She's mine. Bring her out, or I'll bring men to take her." He tore it down, his jaw hardening. Inside, the firelight glowed, Mary Ellen stirred soup, Laura played with her carved horse, and Hollis knew his quiet life had crossed a line. He'd chosen his side. Outside, the prairie braced for storm. Inside, a reckoning was already taking shape. The wind carried a warning that night, low, hollow, endless. Hollis Miller sat by the window, pipe unlit, eyes fixed on the dark horizon. He loaded his rifle and set it beside the door, but he hoped not to use it. Violence to him was a debt no man could pay off once collected. Inside, Mary Ellen moved quietly, wrapping a shawl around Laura. The child had fallen asleep by the fire, her little wooden horse clutched tight in her hand. Hollis could hear her soft breaths, steady and innocent. That sound, he thought, was worth any fight. "Will he come tonight?" Mary Ellen asked softly. "Yes," Hollis said. His voice was calm, but his hands flexed once at his sides. Outside, the first flakes of snow began to fall, heavy, fat, silent. And then came the crunch of boots. More than one pair. Hollis rose slowly, towering in the half-light. He opened the door. Elias Carter stood there, a bottle in his hand, his face a map of fury. Behind him, 3 men from town, drunk, mean, restless. They shifted uneasily under Hollis's gaze, but Elias spat into the snow and sneered. "You think you can steal another man's wife and live quiet?" he slurred. "You're nothing, Miller, a lumbering fool hiding behind a widow's skirts." Mary Ellen appeared in the doorway behind Hollis. "Elias, please, go home. You've done enough harm." Her voice broke something in him, not with pity, but pride. He lunged forward. Hollis stepped between them. The blow that followed hit like thunder. A bottle shattered against Hollis's chest, whiskey splashing down his coat. He didn't flinch. Instead, his great hand came down, seizing Elias by the collar and lifting him clear off his feet. "You'll not touch her again," Hollis said, his voice low as the storm outside. "Not her. Not the child. Not ever." The other men shifted, hands near their pistols, but something in Hollis's eyes froze them. It wasn't rage, it was sorrow, the kind that warned of what would happen if they took one more step. Elias spat blood, his face purple with hate. "You'll hang for this," he hissed. "No," Hollis said, dropping him into the snow. but you might freeze." He turned and went back inside, closing the door. The storm swallowed the sound of curses fading into the distance. Mary Ellen sank into a chair, trembling. Hollis knelt by the fire, his hands shaking as he added another log. "They'll talk," he said quietly. "They already do," she whispered. "But I don't care anymore." For the first time, she took his hand. Rough and scarred as it was, it felt safe, warmer than the fire. Days passed. The storm thickened, burying the cabin in silence. Laura laughed as Hollis built her a snow fort outside the door. Mary Ellen's strength returned, and with it came a lightness Hollis hadn't seen in years. Not since before his wife's passing. When the thaw came, the sheriff rode up the trail. He dismounted slow, hat in hand. "Elias Carter's dead," he said. "They found him half a mile out, froze to death in the storm. The others say he tried to come back here." Mary Ellen turned pale. Hollis looked at the floor. "You ain't in trouble, Hollis," the sheriff said after a moment. "Everyone knows what kind of man Elias was. You did right by her." After the sheriff left, silence filled the cabin again, but now it was peaceful. Hollis went to the river, cut new timber, and began to build. "What are you making?" Mary Ellen asked. He looked up from his work, sweat shining on his brow. "A second cabin. You and Laura need your own place, if you're to stay." Her lips parted, not in surprise, but in the ache of gratitude. "We'll stay," she said softly, "but only if you promise something." Hollis set down his hammer. "What's that?" "That you'll stop being alone." He smiled for the first time in years, small, uncertain, but real. "Then I reckon I'll need a better cook than myself," he said. The days grew long and golden. Spring came to the prairie like a blessing. Mary Ellen's garden bloomed, Laura's laughter filled the woods, and Hollis's cabin no longer felt like a tomb. In town, people still whispered. Some said Mary Ellen had bewitched him. Others said Hollis had done it out of guilt. But when they saw the three of them riding in together on Sundays, the giant, the quiet woman, and the laughing child, the whisper softened. Even Reverend Hodges began to smile when he saw them. Years passed. The scars of the past faded, though they never truly vanished. Hollis and Mary Ellen worked side by side, through drought, flood, and loss. They never married in church, never signed a paper, but the land itself bore witness. One summer evening, as the sun bled orange across the horizon, Hollis sat on the porch, whittling a new horse for Laura. She was older now, nearly grown, her laughter still bright as wind and wheat. Mary Ellen came out, wiping her hands on her apron. "You never stop carving," she teased. "Gives me peace," he said, handing her the finished horse. She turned it over in her hands, smiling softly. "You've given us more than peace, Hollis." He didn't answer, but his hand found hers. They sat that way, watching the last light fade behind the pines. The world beyond the woods could gossip, lie, and forget, but here, in this small clearing, there was only truth. A man who had lost everything, a woman who had survived everything, and a child who had given them both a reason to live again. When the wind rose through the grass, it carried their laughter into the dusk, a quiet promise that no cruelty, no winter, and no whisper could ever take away. And though no preacher ever spoke their vows, the land itself bore witness. The hills, the creek, and the timber of the two cabins standing side by side, one built for love and the other built from it.